On today's episode of Locked On Canadiens, Montreal ends their 4-game road trip with a win, ending it on a positive note. And Scott and I will discuss whether or not we are so back.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 1272 of Locked On Canadiens. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you do not miss an episode. As part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team every day. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as that Maybe It's Ian. We are not joined today by Laura Saba, who is still jet-setting around the world. Instead, we're bringing back a former host in Scott Matla. Scott of Habs Eyes on the Prize, Laval Rocket coverage, the guy that posts gifs and enrages the entire province of Alberta. Scott, how are you feeling after that game on Sunday afternoon?
I was great until Niko Mikkola decided, what if I just ruin this with just the most epic diaper filling we've seen in a long time? But it was a game that encapsulated the "we're so back, it's so over" meter repeatedly in our group chat with Laura and everything else, that Ian and I were both up and then doing the wave. And if you were not watching on YouTube, you're missing so many hand gestures right now. It was an experience and a half.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. On Saturday, I took the night, usually the Canadiens are playing Saturday, but they weren't. So I went to a local rink where the Danbury Trashers used to play, and there's still a team playing in the Federal Professional Hockey League there. What Mikkola did at the end of the game belonged in that league, not in the National Hockey League. Like, that was slap shot level garbage from a player who knows better. Like, that's not a guy who's like, oh, well, whatever. It's my cup of tea in the NHL. Like, that's a big part of that roster. He should absolutely know better. And for those who might have missed it, the end of the game, he wired a slap shot down the ice. Game was over. Nearly clocked David Savard on the way through. Looking at the box score, they did give him a 10-minute misconduct and 2 minutes for unsportsmanlike conduct. The box score said it was against Sam Montembeault, who was like the last person I was worried about in that moment because he's covered in equipment. He would have been fine. But David Savard literally had to pull a duck and cover in order to not get taken out by that puck. And thankfully, the Canadiens responded in suit. They did what you would want a team to do in that moment. Don't take liberties against us. We know we're playing you guys on Tuesday, but you're not getting away with that in the moment. I kind of liked watching them all converge on that player and just say, hey, that was crap. Don't do that again.
It's such a weird thing, too, because I would expect that from Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, Matthew Tkachuk if you were playing. But that being... I don't know much about Niko Mikkola. I know he made the Finnish Four Nations team because they ran out of healthy defensemen for that tournament. But it's like, what are you doing? You play this team again on Tuesday. They're already coming in they're a little bit wounded. It's been a bad couple of weeks for the Canadiens. You know they're going to be feisty. And now you've just given them more motivation on Tuesday to come out there and not only beat you on the scoreboard and potentially sweep the season series, but they're probably going to want to kick your ass as well. Now, Arbor-Jack, I didn't play in this game because he was a healthy scratch, which is what it is. I can understand the logic behind that, but all you've done is set the tone for Tuesday in that it's going to be stupid. And stupid hockey is both. It's fun if you're on the neutral side of things and you're just watching the chaos unfurl. But for the Habs fans, it's like, I'd rather just watch the hockey game play out because they got to play the Bruins and then the Flyers again. I know you do your weekly thing, but it's not exactly a low stress week for the Montreal Canadiens.
No, there's a lot of angry, even when those teams are playing well, they're angry. They're not playing well. I would imagine they're going to be angrier coming into, games against the Canadiens, where it's going to matter for the Canadiens. It's not going to matter for those other teams. Let's talk about the game in Florida. We'll touch on the weekly recap in our second segment, and then Scott, the one of the main reasons we're having him on today is to discuss the Laval Rocket and the fact that they are playoff bound. So we'll be able to cover playoff games regardless of whether or not Montreal makes it this year. So that's always very fun to be able to say that this organization is going to play playoff games in some respects. So we'll cover Laval at the end of the show too. So let's stick in this game in Florida. This was the first time the Canadiens gave up less than 3 since March 15th, which was also against the Florida Panthers. So I don't know what it is about this Florida team. that is sort of a get right team for this Montreal Canadiens. Because if you remember the last time they played them, it was at home, and the 2 games before, while they took 3 or 4 points against Seattle and Vancouver, those games they blew leads. It was really tough to watch at times. Like Florida, for some reason, is the Montreal Canadiens get right team, which is bizarre. Should not be the case that this defending Stanley Cup champion, back-to-back Eastern Conference champion, and potential Eastern Conference and Stanley Cup champion again this year is the team that you've beaten now 3 times and have already clinched the season series. It's weird that they're doing this against Florida, right?
Yeah, and I'm looking at the season series. 4-0 shutout, which I believe was Jakub Dovich's first game in the NFL. Then
It's
they
so funny.
won 2 weeks ago, and they won 4-2 today. So they're outscoring the Panthers. Gonna do some real bad math here. 11-3 this season so far, and they have 1 game left to play. For all those years that we've seen them like kind of play type, then the Panthers are just better than them over the past couple years. The Canadiens this year against not just the Panthers, but the Atlantic Division as a whole has been really strong. They're like, I think it was 15-6 against the division this season. And those losses have come to Toronto and I believe the Bruins in this. Like all the bogey teams so far for the Canadiens haven't been that. They've beaten the Senators. They've beaten the Panthers. We'll see. They've beaten the Sabres, the biggest bogey team for them in the entire division here.
I mean, they beat the Lightning twice too, right? They're 2-1 against the Lightning.
I had completely forgotten that. I'm going to be I cannot recall any of the Tampa games this season, which I think is fine because usually they're infuriating on a lot of different levels, but
yeah,
it's almost infuriating that it's like they rise to the occasion in these games. A game like this is that, hey, we've had a bad week. Florida's coming. We're going down to Florida. It's not expected we're going to do well. And then from the outset, the team looked much better than it had in any of the previous games this week. Better than the Philly game, better than everything else, better than the St. Louis game. They just looked a lot more cohesive and put together in this one.
Yeah, look, they never trailed, which is something that we haven't been able to say in a long time. Yes, they didn't run away with the game like we would have wanted, but they were right in there with one of the league's best teams. I know Florida's banged up. They're dealing with guys, but they also just added Brad Marchand, so I don't feel too bad for them. It's very funny to me that Montreal seems to save their best moments for this team. And even, you're looking at the teams that they'll probably play if they were to make the playoffs. Florida's one of them if they somehow were to topple Ottawa. I think that's kind of tough to do at this point in the season. But if they're going to, like, Washington's another one. And yes, Montreal lost a bunch to Washington this year. They did take one in overtime, but those were tight games, right? Like they were close games until, the third period where Washington just ended up beating them. That's the sort of game that this was for me. Like they were able to hang in there against a really good team. And look, their top guys got it done. Slafkovsky with a goal on the power play, Laine with a goal on the power play, Suzuki with the game-winning goal, Lane Hutson with assists on every goal. He was everywhere again. He's now 6 points from passing Chris Chelios for all-time rookie defenseman scoring for the Montreal Canadiens. So 6 more points and he passes him. I believe he needs 2 more assists to pass him in the assist mark for that sort of record. I mean, it just seems like, Matvei Michkov this week was taking some steps back into the Calder competition, and Lane Hutson just decided to say, no, you're not. Like that. Any difference that Michkov made up, Hutson has filled it. Like it's not happening for Michkov at this point.
And we didn't have to fire our really unpopular coach to make this kind of thing happen. Unfortunately, like this is the Canadiens decided, you know what? Nope. Lane, and here's the thing is, when we'll talk about it like the weekly recap and everything here in a little bit, but like Lane Hutson was the spine of the Montreal Canadiens this week. Losses and everything with that included. Lane Hutson's the only one that like I can look at every single game and just be like, wasn't the problem. Moving on, was not the problem. He was so good in this that I keep just going, wow. He's Owen Wilsoning the entire thing here. It's just wow.
Yeah.
At every turn watching him. I feel blessed to be able to watch him do this every single night.
Yeah, I said Hutson had a goal, an assist on every goal. It's not true. I forgot the Gallagher empty netter, which was an assist off of the boot of Christian Dvorak, blocking a huge shot. Gallagher looked like he knew the size of the goal in front of him because he if he could have taken out a protractor to measure the angle, like that's what he would have done. He stared down that empty net for 1, 2, 3 seconds and then put it right down the middle. I'm glad he took that time instead of just, whipping it and icing it. Like maybe we're talking about a different result if that happens. But just a really fantastic game across the board for the Montreal Canadiens. We'll cover this game a little bit more as it sits within the the full week that was for the Montreal Canadiens, a 4-game road trip where they only managed to win 1 game, but they ended on a positive note and are headed back home this week to finish off the season series against the Florida Panthers. We'll cover the rest of the week and Laval Rocket's entry into the playoffs in just a minute. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets at the end of the tournament. I've got my eye on a few underdogs, I'm sure you do as well, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournaments happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And if you miss the opening tip-off, you can get in on some live bets as you watch the action unfold. It's never too late to jump into the action with FanDuel. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No more waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, we are back. It's time to break down the week. Not a particularly strong week for the Montreal Canadiens, unfortunately, but these things happen. Thankfully, it was not a very strong week for anybody else in the Eastern Conference who was fighting for that last playoff spot. Montreal finds themselves back in a playoff spot after defeating Florida due to the fact that them and the Rangers are tied at 77 points, but the Rangers have played 1 more game. So Montreal needs to start picking up more points in order to put distance between them and the Rangers, because they're not going to win the tiebreaker. The first tiebreaker is regulation wins. Montreal has 25. The Rangers have 32. So they're not going to win that. They need to start picking up points and put distance in between them and the Rangers. The Blue Jackets have reasserted themselves into that conversation. Montreal pulls 2 points ahead of them, but once again, they've played 1 more game than the Jackets, as well as the Islanders, who are 3 points back. When you look back on this week for the Montreal Canadiens, I guess let's start with what went wrong. What was bad for them this week? Because I think there's some positives to build on after that Florida game. But what was bad? What really happened this week that put them behind the 8 ball?
They had no good. They had 1 good start and then promptly threw it in the trash against Carolina. I guess we can't say they had a bad start against Florida. They won the game. I thought they played. That was their most consistent effort this week. But against St. Louis, against Philadelphia, and then everything after the first 37 seconds of the Hurricanes game, they did not get a start that they needed. They were behind the 8 ball. They weren't getting any saves, and God bless you, Sam Montembeault. But between the St. Louis game and the Carolina game, it's just they never got off on the right foot. The other teams did, and then they could not recover. Even if they made that little bit of a push like they did in the Flyers game where they played the 1980s, mediocre goaltending of the Flyers, they couldn't overcome their own errors and slow starts. And that it doomed them for a team that is full of heart, full of grit and determination, but you're not made to come back every single time. The win over Ottawa or Colorado, or an shootout loss to Colorado, that comeback, phenomenal. Do not make a habit of trying that. You are not built to play that kind of hockey every single game, night in and night out. And it felt like, they got down against St. Louis. I'm like, they can probably do this. It's St. Louis. And then it just didn't happen. And you just kind of watch, the energy meter on the team fall shift after shift there.
Yeah, the St. Louis loss is the one that I'm like, I guess maybe least worried about, because St. Louis is red hot. I think they've won 7 straight now. They're just unbeatable right now. That's just that seems to happen with this Blues team, is they're not very good all year, and then all of a sudden they're just incredible and you can't beat them. But you're right.
Add your point there, Ian. They've won 9 straight games.
Oh, cool. I've missed 2 in there. What's 2 games here or there?
It's the St. Louis Blues. No one would blame you. It's fine.
Yeah. But like the Carolina game, they had an excellent start and immediately threw it away. The Philadelphia game, they didn't start on time, and they scored 4 times, which should be enough to beat that Flyers team, and it wasn't. because their defensive mistake. I think the defense was the big thing that let them down this week. You could talk goaltending too, but just the defensive play wasn't great. And I know, like, let's touch on Sam Montembeault, especially in the Florida game, because I thought that was the perfect encapsulation of what it is to watch this goaltender, where everything in tight, he's stopping. You're not beating him. He makes really great saves. His positioning is sound. And then Seth Jones takes a slap shot from in between the face-off circle and the blue line. Money Puck gave it a 2.1% chance of being a goal. The puck never leaves the ice. Sam Montembeault is watching it. And I know people go, oh, people are in front of him. Watch Sam Montembeault's head. He's looking right down the barrel of the puck, and he's watching it go through his legs. He puts his head down as he sees it the whole way, and it still goes in. This is a real issue with Sam Montembeault. I know I was getting into with people on Twitter or on Bluesky, oh, that's mean. And I was like, well, I'm in Connecticut and he's in Florida, so I'm far enough away where this will go right by him. There's no chance of him stopping this anyway.
I like Sam Montembeault a lot. I know he is capable, a lot more capable than what this run of form has shown there, where he came out of the Four Nations red hot and looked really good, even if some of those games weren't great, like the game against Colorado and New York, that it's like, okay, they lost those, but he also did hold them in, made some big saves in those games to keep them in there. And then this week, I was grimacing at shots from the point because it's like, I don't know what's going to happen here. And against Florida, I thought he looked great. Like you said, in tight. The Seth Jones goal, though, because I was on delay watching it because I had to watch through other means because NHL Network is awful. And I see everyone going, he's got to have that. I'm like, so this is a long shot from the point that went in.
You bet.
And watching the replay, he drops down and he can tell he doesn't have the puck because his head's immediately going back with that thing that goalies do when they give it up. And the defense, Carrier made a mistake on the first goal that Florida scored in this one. And then everything kind of locked into place. And they just started playing out a lot better in that regard. Better than we saw in the Philadelphia game, the Carolina game, the St. Louis game. They were able to push back. And I don't know if it's Florida's structure or what, but it was nice to see what this Canadiens offense can look like when they're not just struggling to clear their lines.
Yeah, no, look, I think one of the things that helped in the Florida game is what we were kind of it was one of the issues across the rest of the lineup is that, like, the fourth line really struggled and it didn't allow Marty to roll four lines, which he loves to do. And the fourth line, it sets the tone for this team. He's not been able to rely on that fourth line, which has now led him to break it up. We saw Emil Heineman move from the fourth line to whatever you want to call it. It's usually the second line. Today it was the third line because the second line was the Gallagher, Dvorak, Anderson line, which was very good and has been very good for a little while now. But the moving Heineman next to Newhook and Laine, I thought was an excellent decision. I thought Heineman brought that line what it needed, which was a strong forechecker to go in there and work the puck. He's also really fast. They've had a hard time finding a player who can keep up with Alex Newhook. And I think they might have found it in Emil Heineman. He might stay there the rest of the year, honestly, because I think like that gives them the best chance to win, which is what all of Marty's decisions are based around at this point, is what gives me the best chance to win. Against Carolina, it was going 11-7, even though nobody wanted it. And I know Marty didn't want it. He hates going 11-7. And he did it and said, look, see, it didn't work. We have to make another decision. Of course, unfortunately, that leaves Arber Xhekaj out of the lineup. But with the way that the game ended against Florida on Tuesday, or on Sunday rather, and where we're headed on Tuesday, I wouldn't be shocked if they find a way to get Arber Xhekaj back into the lineup. I don't know if that's going 11-7 again, but like you might need him because it's a mess.
So I was thinking about this too, because I'm like, I'd rather have Arber Xhekaj in the lineup for something like that for the nonsense. And I said this to Ian before the show started. Well, they could call up Florian Xhekaj and run a regular lineup thing here. Unfortunately, the Rocket are on the road to Manitoba on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. So
a little far.
Yeah. So it's a real long bus trip because there's no airports in Winnipeg. So they play back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday. So they will not have anyone called up for this game unless they're going to do it on Monday. And because the team's likely going to leave Monday to either bus or fly out to Manitoba at this point. So we'll see what they do. I think that I'm hoping that they find a way to make this work, because I thought the defense, even David Savard, my issues with him notwithstanding, there wasn't someone from this game that I look at and go, you need to come out of the lineup now, unless someone's hurt or something else is going on. And I know Marty would rather have 4 full lines, even if Pizzetta plays 6 minutes a night. So
Yeah. And look, I don't think Pizzetta's that bad, especially in a fourth line role. Playing him on that second line was always stupid, and it never made any sense other than we just need to put him there and we're just going to rotate in any other player. But at that point, why not just go 11-7? Like, I never understood that whole Pizzetta, he's on the second line, but he'll play 2 shifts there, and then it'll be everybody else's job to fill in that role. I've never understood that. But look, that's the week that was for the Montreal Canadiens. If you have thoughts on how this week went, put it in the comments on YouTube. Send it to us via email, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We're happy to get your guys' thoughts and incorporate them into how we see this season unfolding for the Montreal Canadiens. But we'll leave the Canadiens there. When we come back, it's time to celebrate a little bit of a milestone for the Laval Rocket as they've clinched the playoff spot. And we'll talk about what's ahead for them in the regular season and what to look for in the playoffs when we come back. All right, back with Scott Matla of Habs Eyes on the Prize and formerly of this show, Locked On Canadiens. He's still part of the extended cinematic universe here on Locked On Canadiens, so we always love having him around. Thanks for pinch hitting today, stepping in. I call especially the third segment of this show without Laura. These are the fourth line shifts where I'm just trying to get the puck in deep, not mess anything up, don't break anything, and just give the stars time to rest and come back. Like, that's what this shift is for. But now this is a good fourth line shift because we have an expert on the Laval Rocket here to break down. Look, it's all relative, right? Like, I've seen a couple Laval Rocket games this year. You've seen far more than I. So let's talk about the Laval Rocket. They clinch a playoff spot on Friday. They are in. There are still some games left. They're still playing for first overall. There's still stuff to play for. But what are you watching the rest of the way for the Laval Rocket?
The biggest thing is I'm seeing what does this final playoff lineup look like? Because right now they're doing it without Luke Tuck on their fourth line, who was a big part of that. He's coming back from injury. They've played mostly this entire season without Brandon Gignac, who was their star player last year. He's had a lot of injuries this year. Joshua Waugh is on recall to the NHL, so he's out of the lineup. Raphael Harvey-Pinard's season is basically over with, and they're just making it work. Their lineup's so deep that David Reinbacher didn't play either game on Friday or Saturday this week. They're following the plan to, continue to ease him back in. And in some of the games, they're like, well, it's turning out to be a little bit of a mess, and it might be a mess again the next day. We don't want to put him in harm's way of some 30-something-year-old dude who's going to make a name for himself on that. They just chug along and get things done. They clinched on Friday, the first team in the North Division to clinch. They are 15 points away from clinching the division title with 9 points left to play. They have a 4-point lead on the Rochester Americans. They are one of the best defensive teams in the AHL, and a lot of that is due to Caden Primo, who is 17-2 this season, and he's been lights out. He's got a 2.08 goals against. He's 7-2-1, 919 save percentage, 2 shutouts in 42 in 20 games played. He's the most played goalie, or the second most played. Connor Hughes started 28 games. They just don't let goals in, and if they do, it's rare that it's more than 2 in a game. They lost 3-1 or 4-1 on Saturday. I was out at a family event and missed it, but they clinched the division on Friday, so I'm sure that they were not at 100% coming into Saturday's game after that. But
yeah,
they are a deep team, and they just, every shift, what you're going to get out of that line. You're going to get skill and speed out of the top line. You're going to get grinding, checking, defensive zone shifts out of the second one. The kid line with Owen Beck, Jared Davidson, and Philip Machar are going to do something cool. And then the fourth line is Vincent Arsenault is going to hit you, Florian Xhekaj is going to hit you, and Will Dineen's going to keep the puck moving, or Luke Tuck's going to hit you, or whatever. They're just consistent night in and night out. They're not super flashy all the time, but they just get things done in the most efficient way I've ever seen a Habs AHL team before.
Yeah, it is really something. Like I know Laval was quite good last year as well, and we saw or was it last year or the year before the Caden Primo run where he was just unbelievable in the playoffs
That was 3 years ago because that
3 years
was
ago.
they went to the game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final, lost to Springfield.
Springfield.
The next year after that, they just ran out of gas. They qualified for the play-in round, played Utica, who was getting hot at the time, and just could not score a goal to save their
Yeah.
lives. Primo let in like 2 or 3 goals max, and they just could not score. And then last year, they had a chance coming into the final week of the season. They got Joshua back, they got Struble back, they got all these guys down from the NHL, and then promptly blew it in the first game and didn't even give themselves a chance down the stretch. So
Yeah.
it's
No, I mean, it seems like the first time in a really long time that there's a legit, like we're looking at this Laval team and thinking that they have championship aspirations. Like it's not just okay, we're in the playoffs. It's we're in the playoffs and going to make some noise. Um, how do they stack up against the rest of the AHL? Like, is that a reasonable expectation that this should be a deep playoff run for them?
they are the number 1 team in the league right now. They're 42, 17, 3-1. So 42, 17, and 4 if you combine the overtime and shootout losses. 88 points leads the league over the Hershey Bears, who are like the standard for AHL teams. They are also the second most penalized team in the league because Florian Jacki loves a scrap, to say the least. But they win because they're defensively really good. They just don't let goals in. They've allowed 158 goals this season. Second in the league, Colorado's allowed 156. And they've scored 201, which puts them 13th in the AHL. Some of these teams have another game played that number will go up. And they're not doing it based solely on special teams. They're doing it. It's just because they roll over teams. That there are games that the fourth line is unstoppable. There was the game against Bridgeport where Florian Jacki had a hat trick inside like 5 minutes. And I still don't know how we did that. And then there are other games where Sean Farrell and Alex Barré-Boulet will just trade goals on and off, and they'll score 2 goals inside a minute and a half. Every game is you're contending with something different from them. They are a scary team to play. They're deep. They have very good goaltending, and they're just a nuisance to play against. If it's not Jacki, if it's not Arsenault, it's Lucas Condata. It's Alex Barré-Boulet doesn't mind getting involved in that. It's Laurent Dauphin who doesn't mind mixing it up. You have someone like Xavier Simoneau who, against Toronto last week, drew what was the deciding power play goal because he annoyed their captain so much he turned around and just hit him in the face with his stick and drew a penalty for it. Like it's
Nice.
they're made for the playoffs. They're deep, they're heavy, and they can score in bunches. It's just if they can stay disciplined, there's not a lot of teams I think that'll compete with them.
Is it? I know a lot of NHL teams want their AHL team to play the way that they play, so that when they need to make call ups, a guy can slide right in. With the Canadiens in this instance, it's a little different because the AHL team is further along than the NHL team in their respective processes, right? Like, is it fair to say that Laval plays a style that they want Montreal to be able to play at some point? Like, is it that transferable from, hey, if Laval's doing this now, we're hoping that our NHL team will be able to play this way, say a year or two from now?
I think so because they want to play from the defense out. They want their defensemen to carry the puck, bring them through. You'll see defensemen leading the rush often in this, that when the puck's going there, whoever has it, they will just take the puck and go. It's not off the glass and out unless, they're trying to get a change or just
Right.
killing a penalty. They want to carry the puck through the neutral zone, and then they want to go behind the net. They want to grind it. They want to make the goalie move, that they're not just staying point pass, point pass, point pass, point pass, up to the forward, back to the point. It's going around the zone. It's behind the net. The goalie is never getting a chance to get set, and they're cycling these teams and forcing them to stop them. And more often than not, teams are not able to do that, that they open up the space and someone gets lost in the coverage, and then bing, bang, boom, the puck is in the net, or there's a rebound and it's being finished by someone else driving to the net there. It all starts with a strong breakout, and then they want to maintain possession and just kind of grind these teams down. It's not always sexy. Like, they're not scoring, wicked snipes from the slot every time, but they're just playing efficient hockey, that pucks to the slot, rebounds there, someone crashes in on the rebound, someone sweeps that in. they're doing all the things you would want from a team to be effective at the next level there. It's all the basics that make all the big things happen in that.
No, it's exciting. It's exciting to have the AHL team back and playing at a level where, whether or not Montreal makes the playoffs, we know that Laval will be there, and very important players for this team will be playing in those games. We don't know what Caden Primo projects to be with the Montreal Canadiens, but the fact that he'll be playing in those games is really great for him. It's great for David Reinbacher to be playing in these games. He's looked excellent in the AHL since coming back, which is astounding considering the injury that he's recovering from. It's just all very exciting for Laval Rocket and for Canadiens fans that team is might be on the precipice of something special. We haven't seen a championship from the Canadiens farm team since the Carey Price Hamilton Bulldogs did it way back in the day. So it'd be really nice to see them, get that championship and see how that transfers into those guys' respective NHL careers. All right. I think we'll leave it there. It's time for us to say goodbye on this episode of Locked On Canadiens. Scott, where can people find you in the work that you do?
Well, you can find me on Instagram. I am at Call Me Scort on there. I am on Bluesky. You can find me, just look for hockey clips and you'll probably be in the right spot. I no longer have a Twitter account because I couldn't do that. But this is not the time or the place for that. And you can find any of my writing at Habs Eyes on the Prize. Also pinned to the top of my Bluesky page is just a small private, little Substack thing I've been working on where I word vomit my thoughts about video games and other stuff from time to time when I have a free moment. Those are your best spots to find me.
Cool. No, sounds cool. I got to check out that the video game stuff. That's peak nerd stuff, which I'm very excited to dive into. All right. Thanks everyone for listening today and for making Locked On Canadiens your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the league-wide stories that matter, with the local coverage that you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're also available on Amazon Fire TV on your free Fire TV channels app. Click the Montreal Canadiens logo in the hockey section, and you can watch all of our episodes there as well. You can find us just about everywhere we're posting: Bluesky, Instagram, TikTok, Locked On Canadiens, and all those places. LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. Send in your mailbag questions. We do a mailbag every Friday. Very excited to answer your questions as always. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys tomorrow.